Books of Blood. My name is John, and so we are about 6 weeks away from the beginning of Horror Mayhem. It's going to start the first week of May, run through the entire month, and this is an event that is hosted or has been created or whatever by the Bookish Bryants, and then there's several more of us booktubers, including myself, Mindy's Book Journey, Criminale, One at Plagued by Visions, a pretty big number of booktubers, and I listed most of them in my video, introduction video for the announcement video for this. So I thought what I would do today, since we're about 6 weeks away, is today, or for this video and for the next, for 3 more videos, I would give recommendations for each week of the event of Horror Mayhem. So the first week, now this has got to be the broadest of all the weeks. The first week is supernatural horror or creatures. That runs a whole big huge gamut of things that you can find to read. Alright, so what they do recommend, or what they want us to do, or would like for us to do with Horror Mayhem, is to concentrate on short stories, novellas, and books that are under 250 pages. Alright, so week 2 is Gothic horror. Okay, week 3 is going to be cosmic horror, and week 4 is going to be folk horror. Alright, so when I talk about these books, now some of them might bleed over into other genres, but for the most part, when I talk about them on any particular week, then they are going to be fall more heavily into what I'm talking about, or the genre for that particular week. Alright, so anyway, I figured we would play a thing called Let's Pretend. So what we're going to do with Let's Pretend is we're going to say, let's pretend you like this type of horror, and I'll give you a recommendation. And let's pretend you like this type of horror, and I'll give you a recommendation. So, let's go ahead and get started with this. And I'm going to move some stuff over so I can have a place to stack these books, because these are actual books. I'm not going to pop up pictures. So let's pretend that you're into vampires. Alright, so you want to keep the books under 250 pages. You certainly can't read Dracula. No matter what format, that book is well over 250 pages, but you can read his predecessor, and once you read his predecessor, you're going to see exactly where Bram Stoker got some of his ideas for Dracula, and I'm talking, of course, about Carmilla. Okay, Carmilla falls in the, I believe it might be just a little tiny bit over. No, it's actually not. The edition I've got is 155 pages. Alright, so Carmilla is about this young girl named Carmilla who comes to live with this family. Alright, I'm going to read a little bit of the synopsis here, because I'll butcher the synopsis if I don't. In an isolated castle deep in the Austrian forest, Laura leads a solitary life with only her ailing father for company, until one moonlit night a horse-drawn carriage crashes into view, carrying an unexpected guest, the beautiful Carmilla. I won't read any more of that. You can just pretty much imagine what Carmilla is, since this is a vampire story. I've read this. I love this story. I'll probably read it again. You know? So, there you go. If you want some classic vampire horror, you got Carmilla right here. And sorry about that glare. Okay. Alright, so let's say you want something a little bit more modern. I went over to my shelf where I've got all my vintage paperbacks and stuff, and I looked around to see what books I could find, and one of the first ones that popped out of me for vampires is Nancy Collins' Sunglasses After Dark. And this is about a vampire. Her name is Sonia Blue. I believe her name is Sonia Blue. I think that's it. It's been a while since I have read this, and it's been a while, though, since I have read it. Alright? And it says about Sonia, she can lead a man to heaven and deliver him to hell. A beautiful vampire of consummate immortal power, lust beyond the warmth of blood, revenge beyond desire. The world lay at her feet. The extraordinary power of unnatural life breathes behind sunglasses after dark. So there you go. That's another vampire tale you could check out. And it is, let's go in here. It's just a smidge over the 250 mark. You know, it's 253 pages. I mean, I don't think that's going to be any kind of big deal right there. Alright, so next up, let's say you are in, let's pretend that you like werewolves. Werewolf books. I mean, I love werewolf books, man. I tell you what, I can't get enough of werewolf books. And I've done 2 videos on my top 5 werewolf books. So you basically say my top 10 werewolf books, and I'm probably going to do another video on them too. Alright? Anyway, I got a couple here that I haven't read, and I got one here that I have read. And I'm basing the ones I haven't read on recommendations, because one of them is definitely a classic. I mean, we're talking about a classic in the vein of Dracula being a classic for vampires, you know, Frankenstein being a classic for creature horror, if you want to put it that way, or even gothic horror. But anyway, we are talking about The Werewolf of Paris. Okay? And this is by Guy Andor. Okay? And this is what the movie Curse of the Werewolf, starring Oliver Reed, was based on. That movie used to scare the shit out of me. I'm going to tell you that right flat out. Because he didn't look like the werewolves that you see that came before him. He had this kind of white fur. He was more sinister, meaner looking and everything. And he also wore this, this took place, this is one of those Hammer films, and he wore those white shirts that the guys wore back then with the broad open chest and everything. You see all the werewolf chest hair and crap, you know, and yeah, it used, I don't know why, it used to just get to me, and I actually loved the movie though. Anyway, this is The Werewolf of Paris, and it is about this fella named Bertrand Calais, and he was actually pretty much born a werewolf. It says from here, from birth, Bertrand Calais was more werewolf than human. Alright? He was born of an unholy liaison between a young serving girl and a depraved stranger with a terrible curse upon him. Bertrand grew up with the werewolf's hideous hunger for blood. Okay? I love this copy. I can't remember where, I think I got this copy at Book House. It was 50 cents originally. I got it for $1.99. Inflation. And let's see, what does it fall on the page count? 215, about 220 pages. So there you go. Alright, so another one I haven't read, but I had over my shelf, and I said, you know what, I'm going to pull it, and it's also under 250, 233 pages, is Wake of the Werewolf, and this is by Jeffrey Kane. Okay. Alright, it says here, the beast is the hunter, man is the prey. An escaped madman is heading towards Chicago, leaving behind a trail of corpses. The victims are savagely torn apart and eaten. Is the killer merely a cannibalistic psychopath or a creature from the darkest pits of superstition? And I'm not reading all the synopsis on these books, alright? I'm just giving a little idea of what you might be getting into with these. Anyway, this one is Wake of the Werewolf. Okay? So there's that one. Alright, so this last one for werewolves I have read. It is well under 250 pages. At least I hope it is. I'm pretty sure it's thin enough to look like it is. Oh yeah, it is. Anyway, the next one I'm going to talk about, and I really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it a 5-star rating, maybe a 4-star. I can't remember which. But this is Wolf Moon. And it's about David Irons. And I'm just going to say it like this. Werewolf on the Moon. That's it. That's what I'm going to say. Werewolf on the Moon. And I'll tell you something. This is funny. I don't know if you guys watch the Netflix show Space Force with Steve Carell. But there's what the show is about basically is what they want to do is the president, and I'm pretty sure at the time the president they're talking about was Trump, wants to build a Space Force, the same way as an Air Force, but basically a military division called Space Force. Alright? And his motto is Boots on the Moon, although they said that the tweet read as Boobs on the Moon, and that's how I pretty much knew it was Trump, but they figured it meant boots, alright? So, when they're interviewing different, or trying to pick people to go to the moon, to be astronauts and everything, this one woman just deadpan. I mean, she asked some of the dumbest questions, but she says, what about werewolves? What about werewolves on the moon and us encountering them in what would be considered to be their natural habitat? I had to share that part with David Irons, the author of the book. He thought it was hilarious too. You know, and I'm sitting there thinking, did somebody read Wolf Moon? Because that was just too much of a coincidence. Anyway, I just thought that was a funny story. But yeah, another one to recommend for werewolves, definitely recommended, is Wolf Moon by David Irons. Again, werewolves on the moon. Enough said. Okay, so now let's pretend you're into creature horror. All right? So you could read so many different numbers of things. You could read a werewolf novel because it's technically a creature, but it's also a supernatural creature. But we're going to stick it. We're going to put it down to creatures that are not considered to be supernatural. They may be cryptid, and some of them are just actually real creatures that do exist, because one of the books I'm going to talk about here in a second. But let's pretend you're into creature horror. So if you want some classic creature horror, and there's going to be some Bigfoot. I got 2 books for Bigfoot. All right. Let's say you like something like this. We can go The Spirit. All right. And it's by Thomas Page. And this was published in, now this is one of the paperbacks from hell. Let's see, when was this originally published? Originally published in 1977. Says here, it has many names: Bigfoot, Yeti, Sasquatch. But whatever it is, it's out there in the woods and leaving a trail of blood and severed heads behind it. You know, I mean, when I hear that, I feel like Renee Zellweger and Jerry Maguire. I'd be like, shut up! You had me at severed heads! You know, so yeah, you got that. Got good old Bigfoot horror from the 1970s, The Spirit. Thomas Page. I read this one. I loved it. It's a really awesome book, okay? Like I said, I know I say a lot of books are awesome, but if I say they're awesome, that's because I really enjoyed reading them, and I might actually probably read them again. All right, now let's move into modern times, or a more modern book, although it's not set in modern times. And let's go with another Bigfoot. And this one here you could say is Bigfoot meets Hitler or meets Nazis or whatever. But anyway, this is Beasts of the Caliber Lodge. It's by L.J. Doherty. And that's exactly what I said. This is about Nazi hunters who are on the hunt for this one particular Nazi. And they end up at this place called the Caliber Lodge. And what the Caliber Lodge is a hunting lodge. But you hunt a very specific prey or a very specific animal. And that animal is Sasquatch. Alright? And I'm not going to tell you what happens when Sasquatch meets Nazi. You know, but I will tell you who I was pulling for. I was pulling for Sasquatch. Alright, so there's that. Okay, now let's get a little more down to earth. A little more, what some people might say real. I believe in Bigfoot. I don't care who knows it. But let's talk about something that a lot of people, and I do mean a lot of people, have a fear of. And that is spiders. Alright, for that one, I'm going to recommend Don't Move. And this is by James S. Murray and Darren Wearmouth. And if you've heard the name James S. Murray, he is one of the hosts, and I think writers, may have been one of the creators of the show Impractical Jokers. He plays Murr. Alright, I didn't know that. But anyway, one thing cool about this book is that the cover is glow in the dark. You guys want to see if it's going to work? Let's go ahead and do that. I think I did this one time before. But we're going to turn it off, see what happens here. Let's get under the light for a little bit. There we go. Under the light, under the light. Alright. I can't see shit. Let's turn it back on. Alright. Anyway, yeah, this is about a church group that goes on one of those bus tours, and I can't remember where it is they go. I'm trying to think here. Where do they go? It doesn't necessarily say, but anyway, they encounter these. Let me take the cover off, because the cover is even the cover before you have the thing on it. Now, I know I'm taking too long with this crap. Sorry about that. But yeah, here you got this cover here too. So, I mean, if you don't like spiders, you pick this book up, you're going to probably be freaking out. You're probably going to freak out the minute you see the cover. But then you got these little tiny spiders, and they definitely play a part in the thing, in the story. But then you got Big Mama Spider. So, yeah, if you're into spiders, then this is the book for you, because it's got some really cool spider parts to it, okay? Alright, so that's creature horror. Okay. Alright, so next up, let's pretend that you are into haunted house horror, or you could also combine ghost horror with it. So if you want classic haunted house horror that is under 250 pages, or at least I'm pretty sure that it is, a lot of the editions I've read have been. This one is not. You know what? I'm actually showing this off. I got this in the mail the other day. I had ordered this. I loved it. But anyway, this is a nice slipcover edition of The Haunting of Hill House. I mean, that's just really nice. And it's illustrated, too. You take the slipcover out, and you got Hill House on the front, and there's the back of Hill House. It's got some beautiful illustrations. Let me open up one of them here. Here's one with the, they said something about, and there's little, it tells you what the pieces are, what the pieces of, descriptions of them are. Yeah, for that one here with the dog, this kind of spectral dog, it says, that one's called "We Were Chasing a Dog," Luke said. At least some animal like a dog. And that's from page 113. Alright. But yeah, and then there's another one here at the back I like, because if you got to look real carefully at it. But this is the one that says, "Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone." Alright. I could have swore there's something in the room with me. But here's that. If you look on the steps, you can see the shadow of somebody walking up the steps, but you can't see who it is. And anyway, so there's that. There is The Haunting of Hill House. Another one I can recommend for haunted houses is Night Things, and this is by Michael Talbot. And this one has a lot of the same elements in it as House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. Okay, but Mark Danielewski's book was written in like, what, 2001, I believe? Whereas this was written in 1988, so it kind of makes you wonder where Danielewski got his idea for House of Leaves, or at least some of his ideas for House of Leaves. Let's see, it's called Lake House, a sprawling Adirondack great camp with 160 rooms, each carpeted in evil and painted with human blood. Yeah, really good book. I recommend this one. It's another one I have read this one, so yep, I can recommend it. So there you go. That's Night Things. Okay, so that's your haunted house stuff, or some of your haunted house books. Alright, so let's say now that you're into supernatural horror of different variety. Maybe you're into what would be called, you could call it a sub-genre called possession horror. Alright, so for possession horror, I picked two that are definite classics. The first one I'm of course going to talk about is The Exorcist. Okay, and we all know what this book is about. It's about a young girl named Regan McNeil who is possessed by a demon, and her mom has to figure out a way to get the devil out of this girl. And then you got your young priest, your old priest, the power of Christ compels you, head spinning around, vomit flying all over the place. Just your standard Saturday afternoons children's show fare. Anyway, but yeah, that is The Exorcist, definite classic. And I'm going to say this much, this one does fall over the 250 page range, but I had to include it. Alright, forgive me if it's over 250, but I had to include this one. Alright? However, Before The Exorcist, and this one definitely falls in the 250 page and under range. Before The Exorcist, and you can see where William Peter Blatty got a lot of ideas for The Exorcist from this book. We have got The Case Against Satan. And it is pretty much the same premise, the same plot as The Exorcist. Okay? Little girl gets possessed, starts saying all kinds of horrible things. You got an old priest, you got a young priest. Now there are there's a few twists and turns that aren't exactly like The Exorcist, but again, you can see where Blatty got his idea for The Exorcist. And I read this, and I'm going to tell you flat out, I think I might have liked this one better than I did The Exorcist. But I need to reread The Exorcist to make a fair judgment, because it's been years since I read it. Alright, so there you go, there's that. Okay, last but not least, for supernatural and creature horror. Let's say you like witches. Witches are definitely supernatural beings. They do supernatural things. They may be human, but they cast spells, hexes, and all kinds of stuff, and that falls into the category of supernatural. I have read all of these books except for one. And the reason I'm going to recommend that one is because I'm very interested in what it talks about in this book. And that is the Bell Witch of Tennessee, which who may or may not have existed. I know one thing, it is the only recorded account of a person dying at the hands of a supernatural being, and that being John Bell. Dying at the hands of the Bell Witch, pretty much. Anyway, this is The Bell Witch by Brent Monahan, An American Haunting. I don't know how closely this follows the movie An American Haunting. It probably follows it pretty close. And I wasn't necessarily pleased with the ending of An American Haunting. The rest of it was pretty good up to that point, but then they tried to explain it away. And I didn't necessarily like the explanation they gave. But anyway, I recommend this one because of my interest in the Bell Witch. And if you're interested in it like I am, then this is definitely one for you. And I am going to put one up that I don't have a copy of. I'm going to pop another one up by John F.D. Taft, and it is also called The Bell Witch, and bing, there it is. And that is a fictional, a novel. And I've read it, it's excellent. Okay, so there you go. Alright, so let's move on for another one, Witches. Here is one by Brian Moreland. This is The Witch House, or The Witching House, excuse me. Okay. And it says in 1972, 25 people were brutally murdered in one of the bloodiest massacres in Texas history. The mystery of who committed the killings remains unsolved. 40 years later, the abandoned Blevins house, the scene of the gruesome massacre, is rumored to be haunted. Two couples seeking adventure are about to discover the mysterious house has been waiting all these years, craving fresh prey, and down in the cellar they will encounter a monstrous creature that hungers for more than just human flesh. Anyway, that is The Witching House, and that is by Brian Moreland. Okay. And last but not least, and this one, and the witch ones, the ones for the witches could easily fall into folk horror as well. That's why I said some of these might bleed one into the other, and one from one genre to another. And I'm cheating again on this one, but I just wanted to recommend this one because I loved it so much. And it is 305 pages. So you don't have to read if you don't want to, at least not for this, but I gotta recommend Slewfoot once again. This is by Brom. And it is about this woman named Abatha and her husband. And they live in the old days, the days when they had the Salem witch trials. It might take place a little bit before. It takes place in 1666. I don't remember when the witch trials were. But yeah, she's kind of a free spirit. And she's visited by this being known as, let me find him here. Calls himself Samson. And that's a picture of Samson right there. Okay. And let's find Abatha because there's more illustrations. Here's Abatha. You know, And in the book, her husband dies. So she's left on her own, and her husband's brother, I think her brother-in-law, is trying his best to take her land away from her. And she just fight him tooth and nail. This man, when you read this, you're like, go, Abatha, go, you know. I mean, because this dude is a prime douchebag, all right? But, you know, it's kind of one of those things like, if you say I'm a witch, then a witch I shall be. And I don't want to spoil too much about it, because I do recommend this. This is Slewfoot. Alright, so anyway, that is going to do it with some of my recommendations for week 1. Supernatural horror and creatures. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll be back next time, and we're going to talk a little bit about gothic horror, which I got to admit is a genre of horror that I haven't necessarily explored too much, okay? But until next time, as I always say, take care and stay scared. Thank you. Bye-bye.